Hello, everybody. As folks are getting settled in, just want to say welcome. We're super excited to be cooking with my friend Curtis Renee today. She's going to be teaching us how to make stuffed squash. I'm super excited for this class because Curtis and I used to work together at Rosa's Fine Food. We've had a lot of culinary journeys together.
We have.
Yeah. So I'm excited to learn more from you today.
Cool. So we can jump in.
Yeah. First, do you want to tell folks a little bit about how you how you got started cooking and kind of where your love of making food and feeding people comes from?
Yeah, I can totally do that. So, hey everyone, I'm Curtis. I use rolling pronouns, which means feel free to use they, she, he very fluidly. And really, the base of my cooking comes from for about 10 or 11 years, I did after school programming for elementary and middle school students. And it was in an area of South Warren where pretty much everyone in that area got free lunch because no one could afford to pay for lunch. And so as the after school director, one of the things I wanted to make sure is that they were eating dinner. And we're a small nonprofit organization. And my boss was like, you absolutely can provide dinner for them every night as long as it stays under this budget, which felt really unrealistic because it was a pretty small number. But that's what executive directors do. They make sure you don't go bankrupt. And the only way that I could do that and stay under the budget is if I cooked the meals for them instead of pre-prepared meals or ordering pizza and things like that. And so we had all kinds of things from soup to spaghetti, all kinds of stuff. And it all was prepared from scratch in this kitchen and after school program. And at that time, I was just like, well, this is just what I'm doing because I love these kids and I want to make sure that they have access to really good, wonderful food. And then kind of fast forward, my parents, Wayne and Myrtle, started a farm on the east side of Detroit called Feed 'em Freedom. I actually have on the Feed 'em Freedom sweater today. And from there, I started with growing and being a farmer, tasting food, what felt like the very first time I'd ever tasted a tomato. I'd eaten tomatoes my whole life. And then I feel like people have been lying to me about tomatoes. And so that added to this food journey. And I was actually vegan for about 4 or 5 years and really got into cooking all of my own meals, mostly because when you're vegan, you have to cook all of your own meals. Kind of just went with it from there. And one day I was like, I actually love cooking. And someone was like, hey, you made this soup at this thing. Can I pay you to make this soup for another thing? And I was like, sure, why not? I can do that. And then someone else was like, hey, we're having a conference over the weekend. That soup that you made was really great. Can you come and cook for us for this conference? And I was like, that sounds a bit intense, but I'm sure I can do it. And Under the Rainbow Catering was born during that weekend. And I started that catering business with my best friend, Sarah Sidewalk, who now lives in Albuquerque, but is specialized in vegan and gluten-free and whole foods. So from Under the Rainbow Catering, I've also like traveled to West Africa 3 times, one of those times with Lola, which was so great.
So great.
And am in the process of going to culinary school. And well, it's kind of on pause because COVID ruins everything good in life. But I've taken a few classes, and from there would really like to open up a catering space that is more directed towards Black American food. And so away from vegan food, but really like concentrating on uplifting Black American food and all of its wonderful, like tastiness. So yeah, that's me. And my food journey kind of like smushed into a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Cool. So yeah, let's get started. So you're making a stuffed squash today, right?
Yes, I'm making a stuffed squash today, and I found this recipe a while ago, and it's not vegan, but it's really easy to like turn into like a vegan sort of thing if you are vegan, which I really enjoy recipes that are easily interchangeable. So the things that you'll need is sage, garlic. Here's my camera. The recipe that's sent out asks for shallots, but I'm using onions today. And then you'll need olive oil and butter. Let me see that, okay. Pumpkin seeds. This is not, you know, like look in the bag. Sharp cheddar. I have shredded sharp cheddar, but you're welcome to use like also black cheddar. Dried oregano. Let's see. Chili powder. I have like the window is right in front of me and the sun is so great, but it's not the best for showing things on camera. You'll also need a carrot. This is like soaking in some water.
Cool. And some of the spices will be available in a pantry box, which I will talk more about at the end of the class. I know some of you were able to request a pantry box when you signed up for the class, and we have more pantry boxes available. So they'll be available through our online store, and I'll be sure to put the link in the chat as well as the coupon code for it at the end of the class. Also, just a quick note, if you have any questions for Curtis, feel free to throw them in the chat and I will read them out loud to her.
Cool. Thanks, Lola. And then we're using delicata squash today. I've also used acorn squash for this recipe and it turned out good. And then kale. And you can feel free to use like any green leafy situation that cooks well. And then we're also going to use some wild rice. I'm just using wild rice. You can also use a wild rice blend if that's your jam. But I really like just like regular wild rice. So we're gonna start with the first thing you want to make sure you do is get your wild rice on the stove. I started mine a little earlier. I'm gonna take you over to the pot that's going and it'll be done before, hopefully you can see. It'll be done by the time we're ready to use it. It's like pretty much ready. And then you want to set your oven to 450. That's the next thing you want to do. Then you want to cut up your squash. So you're going to cut off the top, the end, and then you're going to slice it down the middle and take out the seeds. One cool thing about this recipe is it asks for you to use pumpkin seeds, but if you don't have any pumpkin seeds, a really cool thing you could do is just clean off the seeds that are in here and roast and salt those, and that is just as yummy. I've used like seeds from squash for like soup toppers and things like that, and so they're really great, and it's a great way to use like the whole vegetable instead of like discarding things that you don't need to. So I'm gonna flip this camera down so you can see me cutting. So this is around, just didn't cut all the way through. Vegetable. So as you saw, I like held it on both sides while I was cutting just to stabilize it. So I don't cut myself and the squash doesn't go flying across the counter, which has maybe happened to me.
Pro tips.
Okay. And then just like using a spoon, kind of just dig out the seeds and the insides.
Why do you like to use wild rice in this recipe as opposed to white rice or brown rice or other kind?
I actually don't care for brown rice. In general, I'm not a big brown rice fan. I really like using wild rice, like in general. I like the way that it tastes over like other kinds of rice. But like I said, like I think for this recipe, you can use like whatever rice like floats your boat that you love. When you eat and you cook, you should eat and only cook things that you love.
Gosh, so true.
Like it should be good in your stomach, in your mouth. You should enjoy all the parts, like cooking it and eating it. So I've taken out all of the seeds. Something that has already happened, I already cooked squash because I wanted to make sure that it would be enough time. I'm gonna set this aside because I actually might use these later. So the next thing is, I'm gonna clean off this knife. So the next thing, cutting up onion. So the recipe that will be sent out, I think it's to make 4 to 6 squash. And I'm only gonna do one because I live by myself. And I have no idea what I would do with that many squash. So I'm gonna cut up can you see this on the camera? Okay, so I'm gonna cut up the onion and I'm gonna slice it across so I can get a good dice. Usually I use a smaller knife.
And are you keeping the root side on when you're slicing it?
Yes, I do. So I keep like the root side on the onion, and that just helps to just like keep it all together. So you're not like the onion isn't spreading, and it makes it a lot easier to cut. So we're just gonna do a dice on here. A really cool thing to do, like when you have leftovers from like making things like this, is I like to keep a Ziploc bag in my freezer. and throw those in there and use it to make broth later.
Totally. I like to keep the like garlic peels too.
Yes, I like to do the same thing. And I did that earlier, but I already pre-peeled them, so you won't, to kind of help with time. So garlic, we're gonna do a nice dice on these.
When you roasted the squash, how long did you roast it for?
When I roasted the squash, it was on 450 for about 15 minutes. Delicata squash is pretty small and the heat is pretty high, so you don't need to leave it in there super long. You don't want like a mushy squash.
And yeah, I'll be sure to send out the recipe to folks after the class.
So after I slice it, I just kind of go over it and do like a wrap with my knife to get it into a dice. Something I actually really love using for garlic is like a garlic press. It's like one of my favorite things in the kitchen. But I'm actually not in my personal kitchen. And so I don't have my garlic press.
What's up with Under the Rainbow catering these days?
So Under the Rainbow catering actually is not a thing right now because I want to transition into something that speaks more to where I am with food right now and more specifically with like Black American food. So catering is in transition, but I'm happy to like support organizers and activists and community members with cooking food. Just not like in a way of catering. This on this lid. I'm also gonna cut up the sage. And my eyes are a little watery from the onions, which is great.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for how to avoid
I don't know. I feel like
crying when you're cooking?
so sensitive to onions that I never know. At this point, I just deal with it. But if anyone else in this that is here with us has any tips for onions, please feel free. Sometimes I do rinse them in really cold water, and sometimes that's really helpful. I've had friends say that they put them in the freezer, but I don't like to put onions in the freezer because then they're not like crunchy.
Yeah, I've heard like wearing contacts or glasses really helps, but like that's not, or also I think my dad would say like keeping your mouth open.
Really?
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna chop this sage up really good. I hope everyone can see this. Can you see this okay, Lola? I can't really see anybody else, so I only can see me and you.
Yeah, I can see it okay.
Okay, cool.
What are some dishes that you've really enjoyed cooking during COVID times?
I'm really, in general, I'm really into like soupy, porridgey things. So I'm really excited actually about it getting cooler because I can make like all kinds of porridge. I do like rice porridge and breakfast ramen and things like that. I really like also cooking collards. So with the kale, you have a choice. This is like choose your own adventure with kale. I really like to leave the stem in. I feel like a lot of nutrients are in the stem. I don't use the bottom part of the stem like beyond the leaf. But the stem that is with the leaf part, I like to use it when I'm cooking, especially like soups and broths and things like that. But if you're a person that does not like the stem at this stage, you're more than welcome to just kind of like rip off the leaves and either throw away the stem, put it in compost, or save it for broth.
Yeah, Warda did a cooking class with us in the springtime, and she did a recipe that included cooking the kale stems themselves.
Yeah, I really like them. So I don't get
Yeah.
rid of them.
Yeah. What are aside from the garlic press, what are some of your like kitchen essentials? Like your go-to or like most used tools that you have in the kitchen?
Let's see. I really like my citrus press a lot. And what else do I use a lot? Blenders. Like a pestle mortar to like grind up spices, like whole spices. I really like that. The next thing is carrots. So you want to do like cut these into like quarter slices. I'm going to cut these on an angle because for me it's a lot easier to keep control of the carrot. If you still have a hard time like keeping control of the carrot as a round piece of carrot, something I suggest is just like kind of holding it like I did the squash and cutting it down the middle. And then you can have two flat pieces and then you don't have to worry about it like kind of wobbling around everywhere.
Do you have a preference for peeling or washing your carrots or?
So I washed it already. I don't really peel when I'm like cooking at home. I don't peel carrots. For catering or like if something needs to look really pretty, depending on what I'm making, I will peel it. But generally, I don't peel carrots. I feel like if it gets a good wash, then it's fine. Carrot. Okay. So we have the onion, the garlic, sage, carrot, and kale. And the next thing, I have to like move things around a little bit. Give me a second. Is we want to get started on the butter. And so you want to put your skillet on medium high heat. I'm trying to figure out where I can put this. So this is the skillet I'm going to use, and I have my pan on medium high. I'm going to let it get warm before I put the butter in. So when you put the butter in, you want to make sure you're doing like a constant like stir in the pan until the butter is brown. And then from there, we'll start adding things.
And why do you want the pan to be warm before you put the fat in, the butter, the oil?
It allows for even cooking with your food. So you want to cook things evenly, and making sure it's warm. And then also, like, generally, this is a nonstick pan. Generally, my go-to pan is a cast iron skillet, which I love, and I cook everything in it. And really specifically with the cast iron, when it's heated evenly and well, that helps with things not sticking to the pan. So with a nonstick pan, that's not something you have to worry about.
Yes, I love my cast iron.
Oh my God, it's my favorite thing in the whole world. So we're gonna add butter. And like I said, we're gonna like just keep stirring this until it's brown.
Because the browning of the butter, it gives it a bit of a deeper flavor, right?
Yeah, so it's a little more rich.
Brown butter chocolate chip cookies are like my favorite.
That sounds really good. Okay, so this is brown. I'm gonna add the sage, onions, garlic in here. And you wanna make sure you're like continuing to like stir this. I'm gonna turn this down a little more.
And so if you want to make this dish vegan, you could just use olive oil or any other kind of nutrient.
For a substitute for butter, I really like using coconut oil personally. But you're welcome to use like any other oil other than butter. I just think coconut oil like matches like the higher fat content of butter and as well as like the richness. And so when I'm subbing out butter, I generally sub out with coconut oil. So I'm also gonna add salt and pepper and oregano and the chili powder. I don't do a lot of measuring, but that was maybe like a teaspoon. And the recipe that goes out, it does give like exact measurements. I'm gonna take this off here for a second because I actually forgot to take off the lid, the paper on it.
Looks really good. I'm sure it smells really good too.
It does. I feel like putting onions and garlic in the pan, like it just smells so good. So that's about a tablespoon. Actually, gonna add a little more right now. And just give the spices a chance to cook a little bit as well before adding in the kale and the carrots.
I know this is a big question, but what are some of the, I guess, like biggest lessons you brought back with you from traveling to West Africa?
Oh my gosh, that is such a big question. So I feel like, so I'm just adding the kale and the carrots. So I feel like with each trip it was a little different, but I think one of the biggest things was seeing how food and spirituality and like life, like how all of those things are so interconnected. And so when like your food is connected to your spirituality, you're not gonna like discard it. You're not gonna like take it for granted. And you're not going to like cut down a tree that doesn't need to be cut down. You're gonna make sure you preserve that life because it's not just important for your eating, it's also like just like deeply connected to how you live and how you practice gratitude. So I think in seeing that, like it was seen in so much of like even like the palm tree, like it's used for like the palm nut is used for like oil for cooking. Then like the bush is burned down to ash to use for like soap. When the leaves fall, they're not discarded, like they're used to create fencing. It's like every part of this tree is like being used. And it's the same thing for like when cooking with animals or with anything, it's like nothing is taken as like not important or like essential. And so I feel like that was one of the biggest things like I brought back with me. And also just like seeing the connection of West African food to Black American food and how for so long, like growing up, like Black American food being demonized, but it's like if our roots of our food are like connected to our spirituality. And so it's like this lie about Black American food that I've like kind of swallowed my whole life. And so coming back and like experiencing West African food and like seeing those connections, I came back with like a different sense of pride around Black American food.
Yeah, I know we've talked about too before about how with Black American food, sometimes it's framed as like using scraps, right? But it's like I think what you kind of just articulated, like an important reframe is that like it's not scraps. You're cooking with all the components because each part is important and valuable and takes energy to grow and yeah, it's not wasteful.
Right. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute, and I'm gonna drain the water for my rice. There's a little water in here.
Where do you hope to travel to next when the world is open again?
When the world is open again. Oh my gosh. So my plan is after culinary school to travel to West Africa for 6 months at least. So over the 2 years of being in culinary school, I won't travel to Africa again. I'm going to give all of my attention to culinary school. But I feel because culinary school is based in French food, I want something that's going to reground me in the food that I want to cook. And so I want to travel to West Africa for 6 months after. And hopefully my base will be in Ghana. And then I'm kind of still figuring that out. I'm going to add some of the rice. And I'm also going to season a little more because I've added things.
Were there connections that you made between the food that you cooked and ate in Senegal, Ghana, and Benin and Togo? Connections between those places and Detroit, or like food that you grew up making with your family?
I think food mostly that I grew up like seeing my grandmother cook, or like my mother, and then foods that I like learned to cook as I had gotten older. So really just a connection to like those foods. I feel like Detroiters are pretty Southern. I know both of my grandparents migrated from Mississippi and Georgia. So like all the food I grew up eating was like Southern, like Black Southern food.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to put a little water in the pan just to help with cooking down the kale and the carrots. Kind of like that's it. I'm gonna come on camera for a little while that's cooking down a little bit. So this is the squash that I cooked already. So as you can see, I didn't have any parchment paper. And so that's why it's like a little more brown around the edges. So when you bake it, you want to make sure that you put, after you like cut it and clean it out, you put some olive oil on it, and salt. I also like to put like smoked paprika, which is not something I mentioned earlier, but it is something I like when I put squash in the oven just to give it like a little extra flavor. And then you want to put it on the pan face down on parchment paper. And like I said, cook for like 10 to 15 minutes, kind of testing it in between there, depending on your oven. For it to get like tender, and you don't want it to be like too mushy. So after this water cooks down, I am going to add the cheese, the cheddar cheese, and then we'll stuff our squash and top it with we'll top it with pumpkin seeds, but if you want to choose your own adventure and use the seeds that are in the squash, I think that's something really awesome to do. I'm probably gonna, I have an extra squash here that I need to cook. So I'll probably do that after we get off of this Zoom call. And then I'm also gonna taste this just to make sure it's seasoned well. Tasting food is important as you're cooking.
What do you think?
I'm gonna put a little more salt in here and a little more pepper. Not a whole lot more salt because there'll be some kind of like a salty flavor that happens from the cheese. And so when you're like seasoning, you want to keep in mind like things that you're adding that kind of either carry their own kind of salt content or like their other flavors so that you're not over seasoning. I'm also gonna add some more pepper and chili powder. So this water is almost cooked down. So we're almost ready. To add in the cheese.
You mentioned earlier that you were vegan for some time. What made you transition out of being vegan?
I think there are a few things. I think my body does need kind of like a meat protein periodically. Not a lot, but periodically my body does need that. Another thing is just like Black American food like cooks with all kinds of things. And so like I feel like to be able to honor that in a particular kind of way, I wanted to be able to also like cook in that way. And like an additional part of that is I traveled to Palestine for a little over a month. And we were like guests in homes and people would cook for us. And there's no way that I could say like, I can't eat this. Like someone just like cooked me a meal. So that was kind of like the beginning of me transitioning out of being vegan. And then the other things like kept me from like going back into it.
Mm. Thanks. Also, it would have been challenging to be vegan in Benin.
Also, yes. And Ghana. I really enjoy Ghana's like a bunch of stews, but like meats in the stews, and so good, but would have been difficult. Okay, so I'm gonna put this camera back down. I feel like this camera was working with me. I'm gonna add cheese.
Is it possible to tilt the camera up a little bit?
Yes. Tell me when to stop.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for telling me. Okay, and I'm gonna like stir this. I do think the cool thing about being vegan for that time was I learned a lot about my body and what it does need and what it doesn't need. And so actually one of the things I don't eat a lot of after being vegan is cheese, even though I love it. But something I learned is that cheese is not really the best for me. But occasionally I still eat it because it's good. But I learned a lot about my body being vegan. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off.
That looks really good.
And can you see these okay? So I got a little spill, but and here we are.
Fabulous. That was super easy.
It was. And it's really good. I can't wait to eat it. This is my lunch.
Sweet.
So I hope everyone enjoyed cooking this with me. I don't know if there are any questions that popped up or anything like that. So, but thank you for having me, Lola. And thank you everyone that is here. I don't know who is here, but all of you that are, thank you. I hope that you enjoyed and that if you make this at home, that you enjoy it at home.
Sweet. Okay, so I just popped the link to our store in the chat. So we have pantry boxes available at no cost. They include some of the spices that Curtis used today, including whole peppercorn, oregano, and then there's a bunch of, and coriander, and there's a bunch of other goodies in there too, like hibiscus, granulated garlic, cumin, paprika, chili powder, bay leaves, ancho peppers, red pepper flake, cinnamon. And then the box also has some spicy sesame oil, some coconut oil, which, as Curtis mentioned, is a great substitute for butter if you want the dish to be vegan. And then also a spice grinder. So if you would like to, if when you registered, if you requested a box, then you're all set. You don't have to do anything else. But if you weren't able to request a box when you registered, you can click that link that I put at the top of the chat, and you're gonna enter the coupon code. It's Spice Kitchen. So put that in here too. Cool. And then boxes will be available for pickup on Tuesday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. And I'll also email the recipe that Curtis used today. I'll email everyone that as well. Yes, I can re-enter the link. There we go. Yeah, and everyone stay tuned for Curtis's next catering adventures. Coming soon. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks, Curtis, for sharing your brilliance with us.
Thank y'all. Also, I forgot to put on the pumpkin seeds, and I did that. So I'm just gonna do a quick another show. The pumpkin seeds made it. Yay.
Wish. Yeah. Hope everyone gets to enjoy the sunshine today.
Yes.
Yeah. And talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.